Greetings, friends, compatriots, listeners, viewers, people who want to who want to post my picture onto a wall to throw knives at it. It's time yet again for another edition of Fizzy's Wacky World of Wrestling. Welcome to episode 42 of Fizzy's Wacky World of Wrestling, Summer of the Donner Parties of Pro Wrestling. My name is William Fitzpatrick, and I decided to do something a little bit different for today's introduction of this episode to our viewing public here because, well, this is a bit of an unusual podcast for me to do. For the starters, it is the 42nd episode of Fizzy's Wacky World of Wrestling. That means we're very close to 50 episodes, folks, but one podcast that has already celebrated that milestone yesterday was Shooting the Breeze, the podcast hosted by Taker's Minion and Mr. Dr. Senju. They celebrated their 50th episode with a massive, apparently 9-panel podcast that I was originally scheduled to attend, but because I was battling a summer fever, fatigue, and I had to work today, I was unable to attend. But congratulations to Shooting the Breeze for celebrating their 50th episode. And, well, I felt really good today. I felt good. And I felt like today, or tonight at least, because it is 2:29 a.m. in the evening as I record this podcast live, to all of the night owls who will likely be listening along with me on this edition of the podcast. You'll also be noting one very big difference in this particular instance. I'm going solo today. And also, episode 42 is a reference to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Now, I am not a narcissist or egomaniac, and I don't believe myself to be the center of the universe, but I feel like it's a good idea to, well, do occasionally something very different. And this is different, for me at least, because I get to talk, and I get to talk about one of my personal favorite subjects. That's right, kiddos. We're talking about the Donner Parties of Pro Wrestling, more specifically, an incident that happened a couple days ago. One that, as you might have noticed from this icon that I picked, I am not happy about in the slightest. And I'm going to express that displeasure in vocal form instead of, writing about it or sending a a letter via arrow or something like that, because my archery isn't that good, and, well, this is much better of a format for me. For folks, this year in professional wrestling has been a mixed bag. We now have seen Match of the Year candidates by 50-year-olds. Most of the independent scene is either doing extremely well or is currently on fire. Again, because, again, it's like very little changes. And the professional ranks of professional wrestling are doing things. WWE has got a lot of challengers for a belt that is MIA since when, I'm not sure. Also, WWE decided to get into the world's most awkward arranged marriage ever. An 11-year deal with the government of Saudi Arabia. That's going to be very awkward in about 11 years or so. Also, a lot of other stuff has happened since then, and I'm going to probably be rambling sometimes during certain segments, but that's because I don't like a lot of dead airtime on the show. So let's begin, shall we? Well, so you might have noticed the Donner Parties. Yes, the Donner Parties are back in vogue once again, and there's been plenty of Donner Party related incidents in the past 6 months, now 7 months, as we here at Fizzy's Wacky World of Wrestling, or me here at Fizzy's Wacky World of Wrestling, are here to celebrate the glorious joy of agony of the disease ridden, horrific, horrible, mismanaged, agony, pain inducing things that would make Yog Seraphin Satan himself flee in absolute terror, because you've never met a Donner Party of professional wrestling before, I take it. It makes the Oregon Trail look like a peaceful commuter drive in comparison. Just saying, folks. You're going to be in for a really interesting ride tonight. And let's start off with that ride. Oh boy. I'm not going to do a month by month thing, but I'm just going to do some random instances. And the most recent one I can think of is the one that has got me currently into a frothing rage and has decided for me to do a podcast at 2:32 a.m. in the morning. Yes, we need to talk about this incident here, folks, because it's something very close to near and dear to my heart, which is, of course, the protection and safety of children. Why am I saying children in this particular instance? Well, you see, two stubborn idiots who didn't apparently realize that there were certain things that they could actually do legally to, say, check or make sure that things are done in a legal, liable way so that they don't get sued, ended up doing something epically stupid. If your first name to your list comes to mind, Kenny Omega, you would be absolutely correct in that particular instance. Apparently, the two wing angel has now become one wing because his other wing got clipped by the barrage of fire that he's received on wrestling Twitter today. And justifiably so in this particular case. You see Kenny Omega, along with his partner, Alex Jabrowski, who is a professional gamer. Yes, a pro gamer and a professional wrestler teaming up and doing a joint card. Yes, the CEO Gaming Extravaganza is currently happening in Orlando, Florida, and they just did their cross promotional event with New Japan Pro Wrestling. In what should have been seen as a crowning achievement for New Japan to get into the States and provide a massive global media outlet, apparently, somebody forgot to do a background check because the opening dark match on the card of the show that aired on, let's see here, this aired on Saturday the 30th. Actually, let's see here. No, I think it was, yeah, it was Saturday the 30th or Saturday the 29th. Let me go check for a second. But regardless, I believe it was on July 29th and July 29th, 20th, or 30th. And this is just like amazingly inept. Amazingly inept. And I'm surprised, that it was day one of the CEO gaming tournament. And it started on June 29th. And oh my god. How do you screw up this badly? So, folks, for those of you who aren't aware, the opening dark match of this card featured two wrestlers. Aaron Epic, who has been accused of domestic violence, and Chaselyn Rance, who is a registered sex offender. No, I'm not kidding here. They literally booked two people on the dark match, the very first dark match, that have less than stellar records. In fact, one of them should probably not be in the very venue that you're in because, for those of you who may not be unaware, these are fighting game tournaments. Want to know who is in fighting game tournaments? Kids, minors, people that a sex offender, a registered sex offender at that, should not be anywhere near in any capacity. In most situations, you could probably be forgiven for saying, oh, that person could be fine for being in there. Sex offenders? No, not in events where there are minors. What were you thinking? Now, the story gets extremely twisted, so I'll explain as best I can. Apparently, CEO Gaming and Kenny Omega leased out a ring from the Team Vision Dojo. Chaylin Rance is a trainer at the Team Vision Dojo, which also puts to question exactly why a registered sex offender is allowed to train students, especially those who may be minors. Because minors are allowed to train in professional wrestling in the state of Florida, to my understanding. Somebody can possibly send me a message via Twitter if this is incorrect, mind you. I'm trying to be as correct and factual about this as I can, but I'm also trying to realize and also keep my rage under control because my mother used to prosecute sex offenders in the state of Florida in the early 90s. Okay, a lot of her cases are on the public record. She was a part of Janet Reno's defense team or prosecution team prosecuting sex offenders in the early 90s and were the pioneers of DNA testing in the state of Florida. So there's a personal connection here for me. My mother, and as well as myself, have fought against sex offenders for decades. And there is nothing more anger inducing and enraged inducing to me to see these two lackadaisical slackers do not do their due diligence in this situation to protect children who may have been possibly exposed to a pedophile who is a registered sex offender who has had documented charges and incidents, and you decide in your heart of hearts that you're going to let this person anywhere near the venue. Now, because I am a person who does his legal due diligence in this situation, I decided to do some digging and did some checking about what exactly is going on in this situation. What could possibly foster this kind of climate? Well, as I said before, the gaming community has had a large amount of ethical issues involving sexual harassment, domestic violence, and of course, the safety of children at their events. Many cons and conventions will usually have a code of conduct policy and or an ethics policy posted right on the front page of their website so that nobody has to go and contact the promoters or anybody else, and it very gives you a clear list of ground rules and safety precautions so that you can basically go to the event. I did my due diligence in this point and checked CEO Gaming's website. There is no such thing here. There are only two things that are of any form of code of conduct and or ethics policy. That minors 13 and under are to be accompanied by a legal guardian or adult. Minors that are 13 and up are supposed to be accompanied by a legal guardian or adult. Minors that are 12 cannot participate in tournaments and are instead allowed to spectate. So, okay, you are hosting an event that has a lot of kids coming into your show, and you apparently do not have the foresight or intelligence to do a background check. Now, I'm going to tell you exactly how easy it is to do a background check for registered sex offenders. It's so easy, in fact, that I cannot believe that the folks at either who were in charge of booking this event or were promoting this event didn't do. So, all it takes is one search on a search bar, and you can go to two different websites. You can either go to the National Sex Offender Registry list or to the Florida State Registry list. And the information, all you have to do is just type in a name and sign a legal and sign an and acknowledge an agreement, and you got your information. It's public information because of child safety laws. It's public information. And not only that, it's public free information that is available to everyone who wants to look and see if a person is a registered sex offender or not. Because of how rampant the sex offender problem is, sexual abuse is in this state, in this country. Florida itself has a rampant sex offender problem. It's been well documented for decades. So apparently, nobody decided to flip up on their phone and go, oh, hey, let's check to see if one of our ring workers here, the guy that's providing a ring, isn't a registered sex offender. Beep, 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 ding. Oh, wait, he is. And here's the thing. Kenny Omega has not made the situation any better with his defense of this situation. He has apologized in sort of a half-hearted way and has gone on the offensive in this particular instance. He's trying to cut off all form of legal liability to himself, and Jabrowski has completely ignored the situation, from what I can see. Oh boy. And the guy was also on the card, apparently with an injured leg, who had a match with Michael Narazawa, who's probably questioning his booking decision at this point because now there's a lot of heat here. Now, New Japan, interestingly enough, didn't really promote this event very hard, and I wonder why. Because of it's the Florida Loop and craziness happens on the Florida Loop, or they may have found out who is leasing the ring in this particular case. I really don't understand this. And seriously, it's something that I really don't understand here because if you had any kind of common sense or any sort of sensibility at this point in time, and yes, I know how scummy the Florida Indies are, okay? Half the people that work in this place are either on some kind of criminal record list or registered sex offender, of course, or have some other form of DUI or other form of offense that is on their record. I mean, if you look at a professional wrestler and you see they have a clean record, you might as well book them because, regardless of talent level, they're probably going to be the safest bets at any particular show that you're booking in Florida. And I should know about Florida Insanity because I survived Hurricane Andrew. So, as I said, this might be a bit of a ramble, but I feel as though that it has to be said. There is no legal liability clause or any sort of paperwork that explains we here at CEO Gaming are XXX legal liability, large amounts of legal jargon, and there are only two rules, as I mentioned earlier, that you're not allowed to smoke or do that thing called vaping in the convention hall, and that minors must be accompanied by a parent or guardian. That's it. There's no other safety precautions. There's no other protections. There's no other policies about what exactly is conduct is permitted in the convention. Apparently, you have to go on Facebook to look for that. And who wants to go through that horrific mess of a site when you can just go to the main website and look it up? Nor do you have to contact anybody in this particular instance. I mean, I don't know who I'm going to be speaking to, A, and if you contact somebody, you don't know who you're going to be speaking to. You can get 50,000 different voices. Oh, well, this is legal, or that's legal, or this is the other thing is legal. But the thing is, and I also checked the staff I want to volunteer page. There are no legal requirements whatsoever on their pages that list being able to actually go to this event. All you need is a GG Game account or Discord or your email address, which, by the way, can probably be changed or fixed. I mean, it is. If you're in a convention setting, why aren't your rules more stringent? Why aren't your rules more stringent, and why haven't you done the due diligence? Because let's be frank here. This could have been a very serious, very dangerous situation for a minor in this situation if Rance had got a hold of them. And I know that his conviction was only a few years ago. That doesn't make a difference here. Okay? The guy's a registered sex offender. Why is he on the card? Why is he in the building? Why does he have a pass? Why does he have anything that could get him easy access to minors at a gaming convention that is for not just adults, but for kids? Because guess what the primary thing is? Super Smash Brothers. It's a fighting game tournament. Super Smash Brothers is one of the biggest things in this tournament of gaming. And Super Smash Brothers attracts a lot of young players, a lot of minors. And you're attracting with a Nintendo product. How happy is Nintendo going to be when if they find out that you've been, not doing your due diligence in this situation? And I know it's not sponsored by Nintendo, mind you, but your legal partners are not going to be terribly happy, and certainly New Japan isn't going to be happy that their brand and their logo and a match that was broadcast on a Twitch stream that was hosted by the gaming company CEO Gaming itself with professional gaming commentators, I might add. Yes, these are pro gamers. So you add the madness of the pro gamer scene onto the already Donner Party level insanity of the pro wrestling scene, and you have a recipe for nitrous oxide related disaster. And an entire mountainside now missing because of the arrogance and incompetence and narcissism and egomania that has been involved here. Now, apologies have been given, I should also note here in this situation, but at the same time, this is not something that should have happened in the first place if the due diligence and legality had been actually done in this situation. Now, I know it's Florida. I know Orlando is the wretched hive of scum and villainy. Trust me, my dad lived there for 10 years. And it's not a place that is particularly safe. However, there are vacation resorts. There are areas that are safe in Orlando for the tourists because of those very reasons, because they want to keep the general public safe from the locals. And they are very, very competent in that regard in being able to do that. So why not? And not only that, but this convention was held in Daytona Beach, a place that's even more touristy, in an arena that I'm pretty certain has many policies and legal liabilities about which people are supposed to enter this building. Convention goers, people who can pass legal clearances. There are a lot of rules apparently at this arena that I need to start checking out, and I will probably update a little bit if I find out more. But this just looks like a horrific situation all around. Fortunately, we have not heard any reports of any incidents involving rants in this particular instance. Kenny apparently said that they were very professional, although I don't really believe him in this particular instance. Kenny, I thought that Michael Elgin would be the top Canadian to do the most foolish thing imaginable. And no, I don't care if the victim in this particular situation lied or not. That's for the courts to decide, as I said on the episode where I covered the Michael Elgin / Sean Orleans situation. It doesn't matter because the Midwest territory, much like all of the other territories, is on fire at this point because of the lack of quality control and the lack of professionalism done in this business, as people call it. That they've allowed the clowns, the carnival mirrors, and everything else that is so corruptive and vicing about pro wrestling into their very domain. The vices have taken over. Common sense has left with the fork, the spoon, and the kitchen sink, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to some of the territories here in professional wrestling. This incident was horrifically bad for all parties involved, talking about the Rance incident. Not only that, but you also have a guy who is accused of domestic violence. Now, I say accused in this situation, there was no conviction here. That's not the case with Rance in this particular case. Rance was convicted. He was convicted of the crime that he did, of sexual assault of a minor. Okay, there is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You do not let a sex offender into your venue, have him set up a ring that he apparently owned, or Team Vision Dojo owned in this particular instance, and what in the world has gotten into them that they would allow a person who is a registered sex offender as a trainer? And no, I don't care if the man has to make a damn living. And I apologize for the swearing, but that's how angry I currently am at this point in time. Okay, you don't allow that person near minors, and you don't allow that person around other people that may be tempted into his vices. A vice that is very, very bad as far as I'm concerned. Very, very horrible. Something that has no place in professional wrestling as far as I'm concerned. And this is not something that I'm going to back off from. There are things in professional wrestling that should not be allowed. A registered sex offender in a ring? No. Put that guy in a cannon, shoot him into the Bermuda Triangle, and let them deal with the problem. But again, we don't live in the fantasy world where it's perfectly legal to shoot somebody out of a cannon and into the Bermuda Triangle, and I should express that in that particular instance. But what can we do to learn from this situation? Well, CEO Gaming really needs to get some policies put into place for their future tournaments. I'm going to be open and honest here. They could do that. They could perfectly legally do that in this particular instance. And why they did not put an FAQ, it's an FAQ, but it's so badly done that I'm kind of surprised that it's even there in the first place. Now, I know, folks, that some of you are going to try to be is this overblown? It was just a dark match. It's still in the New Japan. It's still in a ring that has New Japan's logo on the side of it, and they're wanting to get into America, and they're wanting to expand in America to challenge WWE. Now, I haven't really watched a lot of New Japan since Shibata, headbutted himself into retirement last year. But I think they're not going to be too happy with Kenny Omega at this point in time. They're already not promoting the show. The commemorative T-shirt that was supposed to be on Pro Wrestling Tees isn't there. And I think both parties are now going to try and distance themselves from this particular instance. Sure, they're going to highlight the highs, but the low, or more specifically, the opening match, is certainly going to be in the thoughts and minds of many people. Because that shows a lack of common sense in this situation, especially for a guy who had become an advocate for LGBT wrestling fans in Kenny Omega. So you're telling me that you're going to put your head in the sand, go la 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 la, and not accept the responsibility that you did not do your due legal diligence in this situation to protect children? I mean, I've always said this about Kenny. He's a mad painter. He's a guy that you cannot trust in an important situation like this. There are certain people that you should be leaving in charge of things, and there are certain people that you should really be not giving any sort of authority to. Kenny Omega is that person. He was in charge of this card. He was in charge of booking this event. So you let this guy, who is really big into video games, apparently the video games have corrupted that little hamster wheel of his mind too. And I don't normally have criticism of video games, but I've dealt with video game players before. They are a very, very unpleasant lot, especially the professional ones. Although I did get some advice from some gamers, so I thank them in my anonymous way to showcase that to giving me talking to me and saying to me that, yeah, you're supposed to have a code of conduct policy on your front page of your website. That makes a lot of sense. And for me to talk in the middle of this night and to talk about this issue is something that is important to me. Like I said, I don't like pedophiles. I hate them. It's one of the things that I could definitely clearly say that I hate. And there is nothing more enjoyable to me to seeing them put into the slammer. And this guy being allowed to work 66 matches in a year. And yes, I know that some of the promotions he did not have children in them, that they were over 21 promotions. That's still not a good excuse for booking a guy who's a registered sex offender, especially since minors have a tendency to get through bar security relatively easily in Florida. At some places. And I don't trust bar security to be able to card people all the time, especially or keep an eye on their parking lot in case Chase Lynn decides to lure any, well, victims, mind you. I mean, we don't know if he's still doing it. We don't know who's keeping track of him. Social service agencies are supposed to keep track of sex offenders. Social state agency workers. Are they doing their due diligence and keeping track of this man? I wonder. But that's another question for another time. It's a horrible incident that happened that thankfully did not end with a child being molested. Child or a teenager or a minor being molested by a horrible, evil individual that is continuously allowing to wrestle. And a lot of people in the wrestling media community have justifiably been extraordinarily angry about this, and I am thankful that they are. I myself am angry about this, as you might have heard from the tone that I have currently been talking about in this particular instance. And for all parties involved, the ones that aren't the registered sex offender, I might add, why do your better. Do better do ethical legal stuff. Do things that protect children because that's the most important thing here. Protecting young wrestling fans at wrestling shows so that so that they or their parents don't have to worry about monsters hurting them. Or at least, have some due diligence in that situation. Because pro wrestling events aren't just for the so-called hardcore smarks and those hacky sack Bullet Club t-shirts. Wrestling is for everybody, regardless of age, regardless of gender, regardless of skin color. Wrestling is for everybody. And, well, in all honesty, that's what it should be. Everybody who can, mind you, legally be able to attend a wrestling event. If you're a registered sex offender, then you should probably be pelted out of a cannon into the sun, as far as I'm concerned. Or somebody who beats their wife or spouse or significant other. And I am one of those people that does believe in a zero tolerance policy in this regard. Because you want to bring back the children and families to your regional promotions, not alienate them with cries of, oh, we're being PC. Oh, we're not allowed to be extreme anymore. Because if I hear that from the New England territory again, I'm going to roast them so hard that that's going to end up like burnt clam chowder. Because the New England territory is on my list, along with the Midwest, along with the Mid-Atlantic, along with Arizona, along with Texas, along with California, along with Florida, who decided to make a grand case this particular month regarding the Donner parties of professional wrestling. Trust me when I say this. You don't want to end up on the Donner Party list. I know I'm some tiny, insignificant minnow in the wrestling world, and in the context of wrestling, I am insignificant. But regardless, I ain't afraid. I'm a person who will happily speak his mind about what I do, about the world of professional wrestling and how I see it. Because I've got very little attachment in this industry. This industry dominated by the four pillars of wrestling. Now, I'm going to talk about the four pillars of wrestling for a second because, again, I still feel like talking in this particular instance. The four pillars of wrestling are the following. wrestlers, wrestling media, wrestling personalities, and wrestling fans, all of whom are horrified of this latest situation, I will once again say. Even those who are defending the situation, I really do hope that you think for a second about what you're saying in that situation. And, well, in all honesty, it's a situation that shouldn't have happened, as I said beforehand. And it's a situation that with a proper background check or making sure that your employees submit to a background check or even volunteers. Why are your volunteers not submitted to a background check or commentators or event vendors? I looked at their website and I see nothing there. But anyway, continuing on, there are four pillars: wrestlers, wrestling media, wrestling personalities, and wrestling fans. Each of these four pillars wants to go full Highlander on the other and become the ultimate superior force in the world of wrestling because apparently there can only be one or something. Despite the fact that this online landscape is an open ocean, there's a vast sea here, kids and folks. You can basically be whatever you want to be as long as you abide by legal laws and codes, mind you. And so the psychology of each of these different groups has always been very fascinating for me to look at, being the son of a PhD therapist who's retired at, and all and whatnot. And for me personally, I feel like there's a lot of infighting, and I think it's a lot of it is unnecessary infighting. The whole I want to prove that I'm the most dominant person in the industry. It's like, why? It's an open ocean. It's lots of room for you and everybody else. Cultivate whatever fandom you have or fan base you have if you're a wrestling media or wrestling personality. Or get more involved or learn your history about professional wrestling if you're a wrestling fan, because a lot of them really don't understand the history of professional wrestling to the degree that they probably should. I don't expect you to know everything about pro wrestling, mind you. In fact, I'm more than happy to teach people about what I know about professional wrestling and what I'm interested in, what sort of matches I like. And then you have the wrestlers, who are the only group in this particular field who have an off switch. The rest don't. They're all wrestling all the time. A wrestler can be normal for a couple days or a week. They have a private life. They have a normal life. I nicknamed them the normal people at times. And when you're dealing with the media, who I feel really bad for, the personalities, who I feel really bad for, and the fans, who I feel really bad for, to a certain degree on an emotional level, because each of them are fighting for what they want. They're all me, and not we. Then, and at the same time, a lot of them are really into the group fight dynamic, but lack the individuality to say, hold on a second, I'm not doing that. I'm not joining this or that or the other thing. I'm going to do things independently. And for those who do things independently, I salute you for sticking to your convictions in that particular sense. That's what I try to do. I don't mind working on group projects at times, but at the same time, you know. And normally I don't look at the top chat, but I see that Shooting the Breeze here is actually is commenting here on this. So hey, Taker. Well, first and foremost, normally I don't look at the chat because usually I'm busy commenting, but the two comments here I'll look at. Preach Fizz, wrestling is for everybody. It's an escape from reality of what life is. Very much so. But like I said, as I said in an addendum, I think it should also apply to people who have, like I said, we have, people should actually start screening venues. Security should start screening people, who have records, for instance, because safety in this particular instance, especially if it's an all ages show. I mean, if it's an all ages show that has kids and families who are worried about their safety and well-being, there should be screenings of individuals or checking of the records. If you have a person who's bought tickets at a ticket website, for example, not from a person or not from a wrestler who's selling tickets or anything like that, but from a ticket website, they probably should have a screening done in case anything comes up hot, because usually they usually register a ticket via their email address and whatnot because it's provided to them by the venue. So, say for instance, that cuts down on the number of violent repeat offenders and or sex offenders at wrestling shows. And that's the two most important groups in this particular instance that I would like to focus on. But of course, it's going to be very difficult to do that, of course. See, there's a lot of talk in professional wrestling. People like to talk. Like, for instance, right now, I'm talking to my listeners via this microphone here about the various different social issues in professional wrestling, but oftentimes there's a lack of action involved because people just don't know what to do in those situations. Well, I think one of the solutions, as I'm going back here to the four pillars of wrestling, is some of the carnival terminology could be either toned down or removed. For example, I despise the term money mark because I think it's incredibly insulting to a person who is a business partner who is fronting cash to run a wrestling event in a state or city or their own hometown. And what happens if a wrestler decides to label them as a money mark, or a fan decides to label them as a money mark? They see it as an opportunity to not do professional code of conduct behavior. Oh, I'm a money mark. Okay, I'm a part of the show then. It's like, suddenly they lose all inhibition and they go completely crazy. And it's like the equivalent of it's like the equivalent of a baseball stadium security force trying to get rid of a streaker that's decided to run across the field. So, you have those incidents that happen in baseball stadiums all the time because apparently they think that selling beer at baseball stadiums is a good idea. When there are a lot of cultures and people who have genetics that can't process alcohol correctly. And I don't mind if you serve alcoholic beverages. I myself am straight edge. I do not drink. I do not smoke. I don't do drugs. And but at the same time, I think there should be a better limit cap, at least on beer sales. And I know that beer sales are something that drive a lot of baseball, as you might have noticed the attendance problems in baseball. But I'm getting on a little bit of a tangent here. But yes, I agree with you there, man. I agree with you there. There, Taker. Just making sure to clarify that for both the listeners and the audience that's currently viewing. So what we have in this situation is you're basically enabling somebody who can't control themselves to act crazy in a situation where they need to be absolutely professional. Because I've taken a look at a few wrestlers' blogs in the past, in particular Lance Storm, and he says and I looked at the promoters he worked with. The best promoters that he worked with were the ones who were the most professional, actual professional businessmen. People who have proper checks, proper clearances, all that kind of stuff. All the stuff that a lot of wrestling promotions and wrestling people who run these promotions don't really have. It's all just by word of mouth or by secret handshakes. Gosh, I despise the secrecy in professional wrestling sometimes. I mean, there should be a standard for pay, a combination of, and I get a lot of these guys and gals are independent contractors. I myself am a merchandiser who's worked in the industry since 2005. I myself am an independent contractor. I own my own business. I own a microgreens business. I sell microgreens to people at restaurants. So, as a professional business owner with a copy of Lee Iacocca's autobiography sitting right next to his oak desk, I say this in this particular stead. Why hasn't there been any idea to say, lessen up on the whole, oh, you're a money mark thing? And I get that a lot of wrestlers have self-confidence issues and or are paranoid at promoters, and justifiably so. Promoters, to an extent, are ripping them off on rages. And unionization would help with that issue, but as I've said in past Wacky World of Wrestling episodes, how is unionization going to fix the sexual harassment problems the industry has? Or the addiction problems? Or anything else that's happened in this industry that causes everybody to loop their heads around 360 to 620 degrees, much like a horror movie monster in a film would? I think they loop their heads around less, if I be so frank to say that. It's a situation that is not particularly good in any context of the word. And also, here's the other thing. Paying your dues. Here's a little fun fact about paying your dues, the terminology of that. That's actually a union saying. Dues are collected in a union contract. In a union, you pay dues. Somehow, the carnival people, the carnies who started professional wrestling back in the 1800s or so, decided to twist that into some satanic meaning of, oh, hey, you did great on your match there, Sonny Jim. Now hand me half of your money. You're paying your dues. And, well, Sonny Jim is going to be eating one less sandwich that night. It's a way to intimidate younger people that get into the business so that they don't have to, so that they themselves pay less. You're stuck on a card. You're not going to be making more money until you pay your dues, whatever that means, whatever in the context of whatever they do in that situation. I don't like paying. I mean, I think that you should earn. Certainly, you should earn your reaction, and certainly you should be able to move up the card in a reasonable fashion. But the constant fret of having that due hanging over your head, it's like a 1,000-pound anvil. If you do your hard work and you put in your hard work, you should be able to move up, at least. But a lot of people don't really see that. Sometimes they'll, like I said, they'll hold people down on the card. And it's a way to terrify and psychologically terrify the wrestlers, which isn't a really smart thing to do because, as we've noticed, wrestlers have conduct issues. Some of them do. Now, not all of them do. A lot of wrestlers are able to turn off their gimmick and their personality and resume a normal everyday life, which is something that I've advocated for constantly. I like talking to wrestlers when they're not in gimmick. When they're normal, sensible people. Yes, people who have mohawks and people who have different colored hair. People who have tattoos. You're normal people to talk to. I've talked to them in independent wrestling shows. They're a pleasant bunch, but they don't have their vices around them. And they're freaked out by me because I'm so kind to them. I talk to them as people first, wrestlers all the way down to the very bottom of the list. Now, I do respect their gimmicks, the codes, or whatever. I try to handshake every single one of them because the handshake is apparently the thing about the business is you do a handshake. And I'm aware of that, and I try to do that, and I thank them for the match. I'm also not big on small talk, in all honesty, when I talk to people. Mainly because I am a shy person at heart, and I also have some mild anxiety issues when it comes to crowds. But it doesn't affect me at a wrestling show. At a wrestling show, I'm there to relax. So the terminology of money mark is one that annoys me. The other one that annoys me is the paying your dues thing, which is less about paying your dues and more of an overall threat of we'll take your money away from you sort of way. Or at least that's how I interpret it. There's no legally binding contract there. It's just a handshake agreement that, oh, you're getting some money at the end of the show. Or in some cases, wrestlers actually work for free, which I go, okay, if you're on a staff at a wrestling show and you're not actually competing in a wrestling event, I have less of an issue with you working free because, again, overall, volunteer staffs are pretty common. Like I said at the beginning of the show, volunteer staffs are common at conventions and at shows and wrestling shows. But at the same time, there probably should be more screenings and background checks of these people because they're in charge of a lot of things. There's a lot of responsibility there, and you want to be able to say to a person, okay, this show is 95% safe because there's always a 5% chance that something might go wrong. Or in the case of wrestling, about an 85% chance that something is about to go horribly wrong. And as much as a pessimist in how angry I've been in this particular episode, I am a positive individual, which is surprising for me to say. And I feel as though that all four pillars could improve. If wrestlers could deal with their addiction issues, which are frequent, and their vices, which are frequent, and could see things, and some of them do see things from a normal perspective. There are actually quite a few normal wrestlers that get lost amongst the so-called problematics, which are really just people who are suffering from some form of addiction and or head trauma because, yeah, the concussion thing. I've talked about concussions before. Organic brain syndrome slash CTE is no joke, and it does affect people. A lot of the people who we consider problematic, A lot of head trauma there. And then we also have, the other issues of addiction to painkillers, addiction to drugs, addiction to alcohol, addiction. Addiction is a very serious thing. And then we have the mental health issues to add on top of that. And it's one of those situations where you would say, well, obviously the wrestlers need to unionize in that situation, but it's not so simple because unions don't really provide that good of healthcare benefits to start out with. And once again, you're paying dues, but it's official this time. You'd be paying union dues. So there are always pros and cons to a situation. I do think that wrestlers should have some form of health insurance, at least because of the fact that they actually do a lot of stunts that involve them risking limbs, and I know it's extremely expensive to cover professional wrestlers because they constantly have some form of injury, whether it's broken bones or teared tendons or something like that. And it's a difficult and complicated question to actually analyze, but there's a lot of facets there as far as this question's concerned. For wrestling media, wrestling personalities, and wrestling fans, each of them have their own distinct issues. For the wrestling personalities, they really crave attention, but they also aren't really a part of an official site or being paid to do wrestling journalism as the wrestling media people are in most cases. Both the wrestling media, wrestling personality people feud constantly with one another because it's a game of one-upsmanship. And then we got wrestling fans who, while they certainly have the ambition and the enthusiasm, a lot of them are very set in their ways about, oh, I just want to be this fan, or we're all fans here, apparently. No, there's some differences. Wrestling media people, they cover this professionally. It's a bit of an insult to say that, actually, because they cover this professionally. They do their due diligence, they do their work, and at times, sometimes they get it wrong. Sometimes they do something massively wrong, but at the same time, wrestling media people, they do this professionally. They're not like me because, once again, this is the third industry I'm a part of. The first two are, of course, merchandising and selling microgreens. Okay, that's what I do. Wrestling to me is something that I do because I feel that I can help this industry, but at the same time, I'm very keenly aware of the vices and all of the issues that are involved in professional wrestling. And I'm not an idiot. If you've taken a look at any episodes of podcasts I've done over the past, geez, how long have I been doing this? On and off since 2013. You'll be aware that I am not a fool or an idiot. I will try to research up on topics if I can. If I can find information that's publicly and freely available, yeah, I'll talk about it on here. And this is primarily, like I've said in the past on several episodes, this is primarily a pro wrestling podcast. It's not a podcast that primarily focuses on the drama or anything like that, but I do cover Donner Party segments because it needs to be talked about in an ethical, intelligent, clear minded, not filled with emotion or rage unless necessary, because I am not some kind of soulless robot. As you might have heard in the start of this episode, I could barely get sentences out without going into some kind of homicidal tangent because I care deeply about the safety of children at professional wrestling events and safety of everybody at professional wrestling events. We live in a world today where a lot of people are trying to go crazy. And I don't mean to go all political in any sort of way here. Mind you, I am a registered independent voter and I could care about politics less. But we're in an era that is very similar to the 1970s. And you kids and you folks think you have it bad now? Oh, trust me, the 70s were worse. The 60s were worse. The 40s were worse. The 30s were worse. The 20s were worse. You have it lucky. You have cell phones. You have smartphones. You have technology. You have all sorts of prepackaged food around you. Those eras had less of that. Those eras were like the modern interpretation of the Wild West. Anybody who lived in those eras will tell you that. If you haven't stuck the middle finger in front of their face and told them that they're irrelevant. Because a lot of you youngsters seem to like doing that for whatever crazy reason. I worry about my generation sometimes. as I've talked about on here several times. But I really do hope that this does put a clear-cut notion as to what some of my philosophies about professional wrestling are, and I do apologize once again if I'm being somewhat rambling about this. I think I've been as clear-cut as I can be. But at the same time, wrestling isn't going to improve unless people are actually willing to go, okay, what can we do to improve about this situation? Instead of sitting around, instead of like a lot of people do, I've noticed on Twitter, they sit around on a campfire and they mope. And they go into into a self-destructive pity party and say, nothing can improve. Or anybody who tries to improve something, something happens to them. Whether they get caught up in a scandal or some kind of incident causes them to be co-opted and corrupted by whatever wrestling promotion or media that they are now a part of. Seriously, I always have suspicion about people who've been co-opted by wrestling promotions. That's why I always say at the beginning of every episode I do about my local promotion, no, I'm not affiliated with them. I just talk about their shows. I know a lot of them as friends, but at the same time, I'm going to do professional journalism ethics, which is surprising given the fact that I'm just doing a random wrestling podcast that gets like maybe a few views here and there. But I do professionalism. For me, this is something that I do for fun, and this is something that I'm somewhat passionate about. Anybody who's listened or co-hosted or been around me at any particular random show will tell you that. And I've been a mentor to many podcasts that have started out in the wrestling world. Yes, you could basically consider me the podcasting equivalent of Satan. Yes, you can hang my poster on a wall. I even have a photo of myself on my Twitter page. Me in my 1970s aqua green silk jacket glory with a trucker hat and patron saints of professional wrestling shirt on. Yes, you could print that out, put it on a dartboard, throw a few darts at it, especially if you're somebody who I've had issues with in the past. You're more free to do so. But regardless, this is summer. Summer is a time of season of barbecues, heat, and a lot of bugs. Especially if you live in the south, there's a lot of bugs. But here in the north, there's less bugs. Still a lot of mosquitoes. Still a lot of flies. A lot of, different bugs and whatnot. And here we are, in this particular instance, we have sort of a tangential discussion about the four pillars of wrestling. I didn't really cover wrestling fans all that much, but here's what I'll say about this. I have a thing about stands. Stands are both a positive and a negative as far as I'm concerned. A positive in that it allows a group environment for people to talk about their favorite wrestler. A negative in that they get go a little too far about their favorite wrestler, building shrines, sacrificing goats, wearing cult robes, kind of like the cult of Full Sail, only probably less organized and with less sacrifices, mind you. Mm, you know, I don't really consider myself Paul Heyman, Senju. Hello once again in the chat there. Senju has apparently joined me in the chat here. Uh, but yeah, I don't really consider myself the Paul Heyman of podcasting because, like I said, that I have a lot more ethics than Paul Heyman does, to be quite brutally honest. As a person who's Romanian Jewish and whose family I did lose some family members in the Holocaust. I feel like I'm a lot more ethical than Paul is. I haven't taken the same road that Paul Heyman took. And this is no real disrespect of the man. He did what he had to do to survive in Brooklyn, city that is literally a prison city as far as I'm concerned, along with the rest of New York City. But I'm not in that position, and I can freely choose to go in which direction I want to go in. And yes, I do tell this a lot of times already, but I've never necessarily said that on Wacky World of Wrestling. This is really sort of an in-depth look at the mind and thought process of Fizz. Because like I said, I don't like to make a lot of things about myself. I normally talk about other people, what good or bad things that they try to do in that situation. And, And I've never really had an in-depth podcast like this before until now. It's like this is because this is episode 42. It's the 42 is apparently the center of the universe, as the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy says, but I don't have the ego or narcissism or arrogance to think that. Yes, the mind of the mad scientist. Yes. Today, my children, we will be doing a little lab experiment about our little friends, the Dawn the Parties of Professional Wrestling. Take a trip to a Transylvanian lab and let us get the experiments on the road. Don't forget to bring your rubber gloves and your experiment. Because, like I've said a couple of times, but I'll say this here once again. Pro wrestling to me is a grand experiment. Because I'm not deeply connected into professional wrestling, because, like I've said, that's just not my main industry in the slightest. I can say and talk about things that a lot of other people wouldn't do because they have a fear about offending one of the boys. Like I would care about that particular concept. I respect the wrestlers to a certain extent. But the boys culture or boys club or girls club or whatever club you have or club or clique you have, I go, think individually for once. You can do both groupthink and individual thought processes, can you? Is my question in that particular instance. Where instead people just go, oh, let's follow what the group leader says. We always follow what the group leader says. And for wrestlers and for anybody else for that matter, that's not often a good idea. Everybody else is just going to be, and this is a situation like, rolling back around to the main topic of today's episode, a lot of that has also been thrown around. Like, Kenny's protecting one of the boys who should not be protected and should be fed to the sharks, as far as I'm concerned. And normally I don't say those kind of things on air. I usually tend to be a bit more reserved or laid back, except for the fact that this is a sex offender. There shall be not thou shall be no mercy on this here podcast for those people. Normally, in other situations, I tend to try to avoid legal liability in situations like that. Except in this case, once again, because sex offenders. Yeah. Yeah, you don't need a vast history of the background of wrestling to talk about wrestling, as Senju says here in the chat. Yes, Professor Victor Fizzy Stein. Bring me the experiment. We shall do it before the moonlight of dawn and the thunderstorms are light. I mean, you can be a fan of being a wrestling fan. I mean, like, here's the thing is that the problem with being a fan of being a wrestling fan is that a lot of times a wrestling fan will see a pretty picture and they'll often overlook the problems of that pretty picture. They'll just go in blindly. Like, another thing I'm not particularly a big fan of is the whole concept of the brand is of a supporting of a singular brand. I support regional independent wrestlers. I do like my local promotion, even when they occasionally do things that make me go, "What did you just do there?" But at the same time, it's like they're just pure fans of that promotion, and nothing else. Nobody will convince them otherwise that your promotion's got issues. I mean, New Japan has got so many issues with questionable injuries, performers going, like Shibata, Homina, Okuda with his head issues. Apparently, there was apparently a concussion issue with the guy. Uh, New Japan's got a lot of injury concerns. WWE has, it's like an avalanche. It's like an avalanche of concerns about WWE because now you might not be aware, WWE is basically under new ownership at this point. George Barros and Michelle Wilson. They're the ones running the financial side of things. Vince is focused on his fantasy football league, as I've said, who's now committed $500 million to that fantasy football league, I might add, in a latest report on, I believe it was ESPN. So you have that situation, along with all the other situations, including the drama that's been going on in Madison Square Garden. But as far as independent wrestling is concerned, they've had just as many issues. I mean, think about it for a second, folks. I would like for you to do some hard thinking about this. It's sort of like an assignment or a quiz. Think. shouldn't the indies be better off than they actually are? And every time that somebody ends up in a leadership position in the indies, it's like the one wing ring situation where they become from Frodo Baggins to my precious, my precious bookings. I am champion Apollo. I rule all of the Indies. All of the smaller tribes worship me as a god. I have feast, food, and lots of women and or men, depending on your sexual orientation. I rule all of independent wrestling. I see all these King of the Indies t-shirts and I go, I think it's gone beyond a gimmick now if you're putting it on a t-shirt and you're saying, I am king and ruler of the Indies. Off with their heads. Literally, I think it's off of their heads because as I said at the start of this four pillars argument here, um, sometimes I wonder if you people are literally going to go Highlander and attempt to go Game of Thrones on one another. And obviously not all, as some of you are actually content with your position in standing in professional wrestling and are just happy to be, there. And it should not be a negative that you're happy to be there. Showcases a massive positive that you're set in your ways of personality and that your morals and guidance is good. But sometimes people get extremely ambitious and decide that I want to conquer, today I conquer Cobb County, tomorrow the world. And they become like literally the latest interpretation of a world dominating dictator of some kind. Either they've been playing those World War II shooters too much, or they literally think that they are the next conqueror, the great savior of professional wrestling. Either they think that they're a conqueror of indie wrestling, or they're a savior of professional wrestling, and they end up getting corrupted because, again, the dark side of the wrestling force is very real. It's something I've talked about beforehand, and it's something that I will frequently talk about to continuing going forward, but it is something that is there. It's an innate corruptible force because you're dealing with people who are, while virtuous, they are also fallible. They have weakness. They have weaknesses. They have vices that a person who is not of sound of mind or of body and or a villainous, vile individual will take advantage of that. And 9 times out of 10, you'll notice in situations that they will. That somebody will try to take advantage of a person's trust and they will succeed in that regard. And they will try to manipulate and or corrupt that individual so that everybody fits into the same cog. Cogs in the machine or nature of the beast. I've talked about nature of the beast before. And I guess this is becoming now the third part of this podcast, which is me talking in a documentary sense, now going on an hour. There are certain terms that I use on this podcast. Nature of the beast is one of them. The beast is something that is completely uncontrollable to a degree. You can tame the beast, you can try to control the beast, but the beast is always it's a wild animal. Sometimes it's a wounded animal. Sometimes it's a territory that has been recovering from years and years of mistakes and incompetent management or wrestlers going crazy or fans going crazy or everybody trying to be dominant in their territory. Yeah, the whole world domination thing. That our territory is superior. We shall rule the world. We have a massive army. We will rule the world. We have an army of stands. Our fandom is superior. We shall rule over this pathetic galaxy. And I know I'm sounding a little over dramatic in this particular instance, but have you heard how some of these folks talk about wrestling? Seriously, there are times I go, uh, folks, it's just wrestling. It's scripted. It's not real to an extent, although the performers performing in it do suffer real life injuries from competing in wrestling events sometimes. It's feeder. And then act like feeder people. I've been to a few theatrical events before. I've been to a few free music concerts. Wrestling fans in many ways and wrestling personalities and wrestling media and even the wrestlers themselves, they sometimes get caught up into the theater. As someone whose mother used to organize community theater events in the 80s, She has no problem blending in with these people because it's like, it's theater, she says to me. It's basically theater. With all of the problems within that sort of structure. And all some of the positives. Because like I said, I'm not a negative individual most of the time. It's just most of the time I'm talking about things. It's something that is happening in the world of professional wrestling that I think is important to talk about to a degree. And we've had a summer of the daughter parties. We've had scandals. We've had wrestlers doing horrible things. We've had wrestling media or wrestling fans or the like doing horrible things. And we've had all 4 of the groups have done something this past year or so, and it's like, how? Why? I don't get it. It's like, and when I refer to wrestling media, obviously I'm talking about the top guy in the game. I mean, I've got nothing against Meltzer. He's a good historian, but like a lot of librarians are not very pleasant people to deal with. So the factor that this person who's now sitting at the throne of swords, bones, at the bodies of thousands upon thousands of wrestlers, fans, and bookers, promoters, and anybody who's involved in the world of professional wrestling, there's a lot of blood there. Blood has been spilled in an industry that is scripted. Yes, we live in this timeline, kids. We live in this timeline, folks. I mean, last year's champ was Ricochet, right? For Lucha Underground, I think he was champion a few seasons ago. Yeah, there's a cult of personality right there. The Lucha Ponzi scheme, as I've talked about on past episodes. Now in their 4th season. Hopefully they'll last, but it doesn't look like it. But again, this is what happens when you allow a man who is best remembered for, well, his gimmick, to allow to be the booker. I think they got rid of him this year, though, so, oh boy. But yeah, you see it every week. You see all of these attempts, like pro wrestling promotion announces service that they're about to do. And you wonder exactly why or how they're now they're finally doing it. Like, for instance, when you saw that PWG had to move to a bigger venue this year because of a ticket error with PayPal. Not because they wanted to move to a bigger venue, no. It's because of a ticket error. Yes, it's one of my favorite feuds of the year so far is Super Dragon versus Technology. And I will say that up front. It's like if I was ever to cast one of those observer ballots, my ballot would probably be one of the strangest ever. Because it would not be any typical names or any typical kind of feuds or promotions or whatnot that would be on that list. And half of it probably wouldn't even include wrestlers. It would probably include just personalities, wrestling personalities, who I think are oftentimes more active than the wrestlers. Because I'm going to explain something about wrestling personalities just for a second, because I haven't really talked about them very much. A wrestling personality is essentially the modern day wrestling interpretation of a carnival barker. Now, for those of you who aren't aware what a carnival barker is, a carnival barker is an individual who stands on a pier or a crater boxes, usually wearing some kind of goofy outfit, and screams, "Hurry, hurry, hurry! Come see this event! Come see Toto, the 10-legged man!" Or "Susie, the not-bearded lady!" And, and they also, and see, here's the thing about the origins of wrestling, is it came from carnivals. And carnival barkers were very important in that because they were the ones that dragged people into a circus tent in most likely extremely humid weather to see professional wrestlers duking it out in a squared circle for the mass of the audience. The carnival barker terminology. Now, carnival barkers declined as the circuses did, as the carnivals did. But the modern social media interpretation of a carnival barker is a wrestling personality because look at what they do. They promote events. They promote wrestling promotions. They promote varieties of talent and or wrestlers. They gift wrestling matches and they post them onto Twitter or any form of social media website. In essence, when you post about a wrestling show, you are essentially now become a carnival barker. Because now you're giving publicity, free publicity in this particular instance, to a wrestling promotion that you like or a wrestler that you like. And you're doing it so in the form of a carnival barker. I know that that does not make sense a lot of the time, but this is one of the few times that I actually make sense in a regard of something. And yes, indeed, pigs are flying in the midnight sky, and it's currently a balmy minus 30 below zero in the HE double hockey sticks at this point. But when you deal with this sort of, and at the same time, it also spreads the problem of if a wrestler or a promotion decides to do something that is against a, say, code of conduct or ethical or legally might not necessarily be the best thing for them to do. Usually it's the hardcore deathmatch promotions that do this in America, but there are other promotions that do it as well. And it becomes a situation where suddenly it's, but at the same, where you're like where you're in a barren, overheated field and you decide to light a match and light it on the ground, and suddenly you have a full blown forest fire. That can also be a positive as well, because carnival barkers or wrestling personalities can actually alert people to what things happen in the world of wrestling. It's like a ticker tape of news. Twitter, for those of you unaware, can be a very positive resource. And yes, I know a lot of you will complain or yell about Twitter being this or Twitter being that. I quite frankly find Twitter to be a very helpful resource. I can just sit back, relax, look at a timeline, and watch the river of information come down my screen. And it might be positive information, it might be negative information, but regardless, it's information. And it's information that's being provided by wrestling personalities, wrestling promotions, and by the wrestling media. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, but it's just news. It's just words. And when you realize that it's just words and you separate the emotion from it, you can just go logically and say, okay, well, logically, there's this, and logically, there's that. Like, for instance, even though I was in a bit of a rage earlier, I tried to, as best I could, logically speak about the fact that CEO Gaming does not appear to have any form of code of conduct policy or ethical policy or anything that's easily accessible about safety of children on their website or anything that New Japan. Now, I'm not sure about New Japan English website because I haven't checked, or any kind of due diligence. Now, like I said, apologies were given, and rightfully so, and justifiably so in this particular instance. But even then, they still botched it and tried to blame the media, which I go, uh, this is one of those times where justifiably it's okay for the media to blame you for this. Okay. You have no one to blame but yourselves. And they're not at fault here. You are. Accept responsibility. Cope. I know that's a difficult thing to do in the modern day and age, but coping skills, with developing coping skills, is actually rather big positive. So, I mean, for me, it's a situation where, uh, hmm, oh yeah, I don't really particularly care about currently what's going on with Brock Lesnar and or his beef jerky championship of champions. I mean, for me, I think this is actually the funnest angle that I've seen thus far. Brock Lesnar, his disappearing championship belt of Beef Jerky Championship of Champions, and everybody else that they keep trying to put in main event positions, which I feel is the optimal solution. I know a lot of people will complain about the fact that there's a lot of main eventers in WWE. And just a side note here, I currently like what they're doing with WWE right now. Again, the summer should be something of an easy breeze as far as watching wrestling is concerned, and well, there you go. That's like it's like a situation where it should be something that is like something in the back of your mind watching. And I know some people are angry about the fact that there's like a lack of a high build angle or something, but it's the summer. The summer is one of my favorite seasons as far as wrestling is concerned because there's no pressure. Apparently, there is pressure of some kind because there's the pressure of crushing failure. I've noticed that lately in the independent scene also. Crushing failure. Like, they always are like one step or two steps away from some sort of horrible failure happening in their circle. Like, they say, oh, it's so great we just did this event. Oh, it's so great that we had all of these talented performers. Oh, it's so great that wrestling could be positive for once. And then you see it in their post and you go, they really think that the other shoe's going to drop, aren't they? They really don't believe their own hype. And I don't think you should believe your own hype to a certain extent. You need to be remaining as humble as you can. But that's kind of hard to do in an industry where it's id, it's you, it's egos and id. It's an industry where somebody parades around in trunks, or top, and in wrestling gear, and wrestles a match. You have to be somewhat. You have to have some form of ego there to actually parade around a wrestling ring like that. And that's one of those things where okay, you do you, but at the same time, there's this feeling of they want to fail, and I go, why are you thinking like that? Why? What has gotten into you in that particular sense? You have a successful territory, and then what they do is they book somebody or they bring somebody in who's going to cause those problems, who's going to cause them to fail in the first place. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of them going self-destructive. And I oftentimes don't get that at times because it's like, you're running a business here. You're not just running something just for you and a few friends. You've actually decided to make the step, invest money into professional wrestling, which is a kind of a risky proposition. And you apparently, in your sense, you didn't decide to pick up a copy of Ayakoko's biography, which I absolutely recommend. If anybody is getting into business, pick up Lee Iacocca's first autobiography. It will give you more information about the world of business than any financial book you'll ever read. And while you're at it, might as well pick up a copy of the Tightwad Gazette. Because you're probably going to be living frugally for the next few years, given your expense record. Might as well take advantage of it. Grow your own produce, grow your own products, mm, be as self-sufficient as you can be. And that's the thing, self-sufficiency. It's something that's not really encouraged, I've noticed, where there's never a true balance of group and individualism. I don't mind if people are want to be in a group. That's your choice. That's what you do. But I also believe strongly in individuality as well. But at the same time, whenever somebody decides that they become an individual or they get put into a position of leadership, they go, like I said, completely power mad, and suddenly they want to conquer the entire world. That the world of professional wrestling will bow before their very boot. And all the world's a stage for me to conquer and burn. Yes, I do love a flair for dramatic at times. It's normally like usually when I used to do a solo podcast, I would do like 15 minutes. But using this microphone is just so easy for me to actually talk and speak. Man, this is so fun. I probably should have done this sooner, but I didn't have a microphone that was supportive like this anyway. Anyway, it's going on 3:45 a.m. as I do this live broadcast, and I think it's about time at this point for me to wrap up the ramblings and ranting and possibly angry yelling that I occasionally do. Thank you so much for those of you who have tuned in. For those of you who are about to tune in, programming notes. Next episode or the episode after, I will be covering an independent wrestling show. It will be SCW Fight Night Volume 1, but I did not feel that that was particularly appropriate to air on this particular edition of the show when I would be talking about a lot of the negatives and the vices and the issues within the world of professional wrestling from the mind of a small minnow. I have no grand delusions personally about my standing in the professional wrestling world or anything like that. I want to repeat that again because I don't feel like I'm a big fish. I don't even feel like I'm a small minnow. I'm just there. So, for the first time in 2 months, this has been episode 42 of Fizzy's Wacky World of Wrestling. Once again, I encourage folks who might be interested in this podcast to go check out the 50th episode of Shooting the Breeze. They are on a much more regular schedule than I am, so that's a podcast you want to check out. I've actually made a couple of guest appearances on Shooting the Breeze recently, and well, I have gone on quite a few rants and quite a few what you call shoots or something like that. But they've been relatively reasonable, I feel, and intelligently and intellectually done as best I can do them. And they just celebrated, as I said, their 50th episode, where they had, I believe, a total of 9 guests on there. So that's going to be relatively interesting to listen to. I listened to part of it, the part that I could actually load because it was on 1 hour and 59 minutes of a load time. And I will probably be doing another podcast relatively soonish. But at this point, I've covered what I wanted to cover for today's episode. And if I've missed anything, I will likely probably cover it on a future episode. Because the world is an open sea, and this podcast is, well, an open sea of podcasting. But, folks, thank you so much once again for tuning in for this solo edition of Wacky World of Wrestling. I know it's a bit weird to just hear one voice in this particular context, but, well, it was a very interesting experiment for me to do on this late night. I hope you have a very good morning and hope you enjoy this edition of the show. Once again, go tune in to episode 50 of Shooting the Breeze. Also, the Connoisseurs of Wrestling, I believe, will be doing an episode on Sunday evening. And that's a new podcast venture by Taker and Biff Kensington, as well as Legends Lover. So that's a very interesting podcast about the history of professional wrestling. They're doing 2 podcasts now. So there's that. I believe Matt is still doing his Ruthless Aggression podcast now. I've cut back a bit on the plugs over the last few episodes, but I am going to talk about those podcasts. Ruthless Aggression. Um, he's covering the Ruthless Aggression era. If I forget your name of your podcast, it's probably because I've been away for a while and I can't really remember it at this point, or I don't know if that a podcaster, is active or not. And of course, a podcast that is going to be doing their free episode on Monday, I believe, is going to be WrestleNomics Radio with Chris Harrington and Brandon Howard Furston. That's always a very good show to go to. They've also got a Patreon available. So if you're interested in extra bonus content or episodes, there's that. I personally cannot support the podcast at this point because of my financial situation. But if you want to go through a spare change a little bit, it's up to you. And of course, I will be talking more about WrestleNomics as well as the rest of wrestling, independent wrestling, in a positive sense in this particular instance on the next episode or the episode after of Wacky World of Wrestling. Thank you so much once again for tuning into this edition of the show. And you can follow me on Twitter at Fizzpatrick14. Oh, yes, Connoisseurs of Wrestling. Yeah, we made it in a year, which is an amazing thing based on our star. Yeah, it's just such a cool thing. Because, like I said, folks, I've helped out a lot of podcasts over the years. I've been a podcast mentor for many people. Yes, once again, you can consider me the literal podcasting equivalent of Satan, just because some people actually do refer to podcasters as literal satanic beings. Okay, you do you. You do you, you do you, folks. But anyway, this is William Fitzpatrick. Like I said, you can follow me on Twitter at Fizzpatrick14, and I have an episode link posted up on my Twitter page, as well as an episode link posted in the Nightly that I hope some folks enjoyed. Anyway, the Nightly, which I mean Nightly at Cage Side Seats, which I sometimes am a part of. And we'll see you next time. So we'll see you next time, folks. And running out of steam here a little bit. But thank you once again for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Bye.